or what happened. It just is what it is. It's probably because I was very excited about tonight's conversation. What's up, TikTok? What's going on, y'all? I see you up there. Hey, good morning, good morning, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. All of the wonderful things. Happy Black History Month. Happy 3 days before Valentine's Day. All of those things. I really want to jump into this conversation. I think things try to throw me off, but um, it just kind of is what it is. So, welcome back to Hijacking Equity. This is our fifth episode. We have four conversations left. Tonight's conversation is going to pick up on where we left off last week. I'm so scared to touch this thing now that um because it just would not let me be great. All right, whatever. So that's what it is. My integrations are not all working. We'll figure that out in a moment. I have not changed any settings. It just is what it is at this time. All right, listen. Last week we talked about in earnest why fairness feels like a threat. And we talked about why we gave the conditions of when fairness feels like a threat for people. One is fairness becomes negotiable, it becomes conditional, especially when people have to compete on a level playing field. Fairness threatens the status quo, which means that there now is a disharmony and an imbalance. And fairness reveals the truth, which is about dismantling or disrupting, interrogating. That's going to be my word tonight. Interrogating narratives that are filled with misinformation, with falsehoods, things that are really not true. Hi, Maria. Good evening. And so that was the conversation last week. The week before last, we talked about joy as a strategy, where we introduced the topic and looked at joy as this space of being able to disrupt the situational depression that we are experiencing, that some of us are experiencing, where it is a strategy that is able to disrupt the chaos, the confusion, the constant bombardment of information, the influx of alternative facts. This week, we're going to take both those conversations over the last 2 weeks and actually really situate joy as a political strategy. So before I even get into that, I want to frame this conversation really well. Over again, I told y'all my word for the night is interrogate. Over the last a year, I have really been intentional about interrogating revolutions. What do you mean by that, Doc? Revolutions? What are you talking about? So I was looking at liberation movements, but I have also been looking at revolutions, particularly in the Americas, right? So that includes the Caribbean, the South America, the North Americas, right? Central America. And what did I learn, or what was to be learned, uh, or newly interpreted from the American Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, the and the Industrial Revolution. I'm going somewhere. Just stay with me. So I was like, okay, we are in this, and there has been no revolution that has taken place where there has been no violence and no bloodshed, right? That is in the Americas, that is in the global context. Revolution, which is a word that means to turn from. So we're turning from conditions, we're turning from political structures, we're turning from a monarchy, we're turning from authoritarianism, we're turning from dictatorship, we're turning from corruption and exploitation, right? That's what revolution means, which the root word is to revolve, which means to turn, to go around, or to turn from, right? I'm saying that to say because there's a negative connotation that has been attached to, or there's a negative connotation that results from the word revolution. But when looking at these revolutions and then coming to this thought of there has never been a bloodless revolution, I was arguing with, I was interrogating myself with this thought about the Industrial Revolution. I was like, well, no, the Industrial Revolution was a bloodless revolution until I actually sat down and really thought about the consequences of the Industrial Revolution and what was happening leading up to it. And then once the Industrial Revolution got here, when we were sitting in it as a country, as a globe. And the Industrial Revolution was not bloodless. It was not without violence. It was not without um, chaos. It was not without conflict. And neither is any change in any type of system. We think that these things happen um, softly, gently, but they don't. There is always some tension that is going to happen between the opposing sides, however many sides that is. So I'm bringing this all around, okay? Because all of these things connect. So when I was thinking about like the Industrial Revolution, I was like, okay, well, I understand that there is this change in technology. Anytime there is a change in technology, there's going to be a change in the economic system. Economics and technology go hand in hand. So when your economic system is changing, your technology is changing. When your technology is changing, your economics is changing. For example, our technology has now changed. We are no longer in the paper age, we are in the digital age. So therefore, capitalism has to evolve to make sure that it can keep up with the technological changes, as well as the technological changes need to make sure that it is able to keep up with the economic changes. So in these changes, there is a disruption that happens. When you are, thank you, when you are in the middle of a disruption and you don't want people to really feel the disruption, what do? Right? When you don't want to, when you, again, our word is interrogate, when you don't want them to be able to fully interrogate the disruption, that's what I need to say. When you don't want people to be able to fully interrogate the disruption, you have to then result to things like shock and awe, to chaos and confuse, disrupt and distract, right? And so in that distraction, there's so many things that are coming at you that you don't really have the time to ask yourself, what are you experiencing? What are you witnessing and why? Okay. Now, I know you're like, oh, Doc, where are you going with this? We are sitting in a time in history. We are sitting in a time in history where we are watching the economic system and the technology change and evolve right before our eyes. And because it is changing and evolving right before our eyes, we are also experiencing and witnessing a disruption. And in that disruption, there is a distraction. And you have to, and the distraction serves a purpose. The distraction serves a purpose of being able to say that better. The distraction serves the purpose in keeping people from seeing who is pulling what levers when it comes to control. If you can control a people's minds, right? The bodies have been taken. You need the bodies. But if you can control the people's minds and leave the bodies there to do the labor, then you can control their responses to the disruptions that are happening in society. You can control their responses to what is happening in the world. Okay? So that's that part. So now you're like, okay, well, you said all that. That's cute, whatever. What does that have to do with joy as a strategy? Joy, like any other human emotion, belongs to all of us. It is a stream of consciousness, an innovation, a technology that we can now tap into and pull on. right? Joy is about being able to control how you show up, how you react, how you respond, how you create, how you innovate. When people are depleted of joy, they are depleted of hope, they are depleted of time and space. They are listless. They are restless. They are helpless. Or they fall into this victimhood or this space of helplessness. What do you mean by that? So last week and the week before, I think it was the week before last, I gave the analogy about the seesaw, right? We're talking about fairness as a threat. The seesaw represents balance. In society, there is an equilibrium, right? That we always are trying to get to, right? And when you have been at the sitting at the top of the seesaw, right, leveling the seesaw or bringing the seesaw to a place of balance, feels like you're losing something, like you're losing position, you're losing status, you're losing wealth, you're losing access, you're losing opportunity. When you've been, which then in your mind is an attack on you, right? It is your loss. And now you are angry and upset, and you become a victim to the same oppression that is having an impact on the people that are at the bottom of the seesaw. Now, a couple of things can happen. For those people who have been sitting at the top of the seesaw, they recognize that the playing field needs to be level. There are other people that are on the seesaw when the seesaw then becomes balanced. They are appalled, right? They are upset. Their reality has now changed, and there is a dissonance that they are experiencing. For people at the bottom of the seesaw, there's a couple of responses that you're going to get with them. One, there are people who are wanting or fighting for or pleading for, right? Advocating for a balance in the seesaw. But then you have others who benefit from being at the bottom of the seesaw because there is a lack of accountability a lack of accountability that is there that they can rely on, right? There is a certain kind of victimhood for people that are at the bottom of the seesaw, just like there's a certain kind of victimhood for the people that were at the top of the seesaw when this thing becomes balanced. So both of them now are sitting in this victimhood, right? Which means that they're two sides of the same coin. I said that all of that to say that nobody escapes oppression, that nobody escapes the impacts the of oppression that oppression has on the mind, the body, and the spirit, that nobody escapes the impacts that oppression has on reality. Now, there are some of us who are looking at it from a factual place, and we're trying to figure out how do we get to the place of harmony, of balance, of equilibrium. But then there are others of us who have been at the top of the seesaw, at the bottom of the seesaw, who are now upset because their reality is no longer what they have been used to. Reality has now changed, where they have been complicit and complacent and compliant, and where their position was on the top or the bottom of the seesaw. Now, with things being balanced, with all things being leveled, the victimhood, right, the excuses, the lack of accountability, the lack of responsibility, the argument that you can say that these things have had an impact on me, and now that my reality has been disrupted, I really don't know how to respond. I hope that makes sense to somebody. I've been thinking about this since last week, right? How was I going to articulate myself to get to this place of where we're talking about joy as a political strategy and other things that I'm going to introduce to you tonight, right? So now that these folks, the two sides of the coin, right? This is what I'm going to say about that. That is a way for us as people who are trying to move this country forward or trying to move whatever countries we are occupying forward. That is a way for us to identify who our adversaries and our allies are. Oh, I'm going to say that again. That was good. That was really good. That is a way for us to identify who our adversaries and our allies are. Your adversaries are going to have a problem with where they are on the seesaw, whether they're at the top or whether they started out at the bottom. Your adversaries are going to have a problem with how reality now is impacting their lives. Your adversaries are not going to want to interrogate their actual positioning in life. Right now, this is I have to think about generalities, right? I have to think about generalities. I don't like generalities, but there are some people who fall within these categories, and we as a people have to be very honest about who these folks are. Again, we have never had a bloodless revolution. Huh? Even the Industrial Revolution wasn't bloodless. Huh? There's some kind of chaos, some kind of conflict, some tension. There's going to be some loss of something. There's going to be internalized violence, externalized violence, intra-violence, inter-violence, community within community violence. There's structural violence. There's going to be a violence that's going to happen. How do we as a people then identify what we need to do in this innovation and this in this spirit of innovation and this time of innovation to make sure that that consciousness, that hue, that thread, how do I say that better, Johnson? Say that better. How do we as people come to a place where we can identify and see our humanity in each other? That's how I want to say that. So that's why I'm proposing joy as a political strategy. It is the innovation and the technology. Hey, Cree, hey, pretty girl. It is the Cree and the tech. It's the Cree. It is the technology that we need to be reliant on. Have y'all ever read Going to Meet the Man by James Baldwin? I pull this up because I really want you to get what I'm saying about this. So James Baldwin wrote this short story, wrote Going to Meet a Man. I can't tell you when he met it, but it's one of the things that I often go back to read. He says, Grace, now let me give you a little context. There is a sheriff who is the main character. He's laying next to his wife. He is going over the day that he has had, right? There has been a man who has been assaulted, beaten, and damn near killed by a crowd and the police because he was registering people to vote. And in this particular scene, this is actually the beginning of the story, the sheriff is having a conversation with his wife, and he is becoming aroused at the thought of beating and using a cattle prod on a black man's body. And then he gets very angry and upset because he was trying to figure out why were the people that were outside of the jail still singing while the man was being beat. So he says, Grace, he could not tell whether she was listening or not. And he was afraid to ask again. They had this line, to register. He laughed, but she did not. And they wouldn't stay where Big Jim wanted them to. Now, Big Jim is the person that was trying to keep all of the coloreds, right? Because I'm just saying how Baldwin wrote it. He was trying to keep all of the coloreds on one side of the street. He was trying to keep them from being in the voter registration line, right? And Big Jim, he told them to disperse, and they wouldn't move. They just kept up that singing. And Big Jim figured that the others would move if this nigga would move, being the ringleader. But he wouldn't move, and he wouldn't let the others move. So they had to beat him and a couple of the others, and they threw them in the wagon. But I didn't see this nigga till I got to jail. They were still singing, and I was supposed to make them stop. Well, I couldn't make them stop for me, but I knew he could make them stop. He was laying on the ground, jerking and moaning. They had him in the cell all by himself, and the blood was coming out of his ears where Big Jim C and his boys had whipped him. What do you think they learned? I put the prod to him, and he jerked some more, and he kind of screamed, but he didn't have much voice left. You make them stop that singing, I said to him. You hear me? You make them stop that singing. He acted like he didn't hear me, and I put it to him again under his arms, and he just rolled around on the floor, and blood started coming from his mouth. He pissed his pants already. He paused. His mouth felt dry, and his throat was as rough as sandpaper. As he talked, He began to hurt all over with that peculiar excitement, which refused to be released. Now, this is the sheriff getting aroused, thinking about what he was doing to this black man. And then he says, "You all are going to stop that singing," I said to him. "And you're going to stop coming down to the courthouse and disrupting traffic and molesting the people and keeping us from our duties and keeping doctors from getting to the sick white women and getting all those northerners in this town to give our town a bad name." And he said this. He kept prodding the boy, sweat pouring from beneath the helmet that he had not yet taken off. The boy rolled around in his own dirt and water and blood and tried to scream again as the prod hit his testicles. But the scream did not come out, only a kind of rattle and moan. He stopped. He was not supposed to kill the nigga. The cell was filled with a terrible odor. The boy was still. "You hear me?" he called out. "You had enough?" The singing went on. "You had enough?" His foot leapt out. He had not known it was going to, and caught the boy flush in the jaw. Jesus, he thought, this ain't no nigga. This is a goddamn bull. And he screamed again. "You had enough? You're going to make them stop all that singing now." And I go back to this scene and this story because the singing, if you are really, again, our word is interrogation, we are interrogating. If we go back to this scene, the singing was a signal. It was folks on the outside saying, despite what they're doing to your body, we're here. And in that, we're still going to find joy in this space while these folks are attacking us, while the structure is coming down on us violently. And even if you think about what singing symbolizes for people, especially for Black folks in this country, right? Singing is cathartic. It is a way that our spirit, our soul is able to express itself in times of chaos, confusion, in times of violence, right? And so that is something that someone cannot take away from you, right? It's the same thing with joy. There's a joy that we are inheritors of, that belongs to all of us, right? That is a component of humanity. And if we start relying on, I'm getting excited, Jesus, if we start relying on the things that we have inherited as humans, that is where the innovation and the technology lies. There is something that we can all do. Weeping is a technology, right? And especially if you, again, our word, interrogate, if you interrogate who can cry and what is the response to who is weeping and why, there is a whole conversation and political strategy that can be built around that. If we start interrogating who can dance and how can they dance and where can they dance, there is an innovation and a technology that we can build around that. If we start interrogating who can laugh, how loud they can laugh, right? Who can they laugh with? And what can they laugh at? There is a technology and an innovation that can be built around that. This season in our lives is calling for us to be creative and innovative and responsive. And we have to pull, right? You see me metaphorically pulling back, right? We have to pull from the wisdom, the lessons, the history, the technology that was used from those before us, and pull and bring that into our current. I'm not saying that we replicate what they did, right? You know, I've been talking about David and Goliath, right? Goliath knows that David has a slingshot. The slingshot is not going to work. That is not the kind of technology we need in this particular context, right? But we can take those lessons, the things that our folks have learned through other liberation movements, through revolutions, right? When I'm talking about revolutions, I'm talking about actual actions, like the American Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, French Revolution, okay, right? That the Industrial Revolution we talked about, right? How do we take those things and then bring that into the present? Right? It's not going to be, and this is no tea, no shade, no glass of lemonade to the brother Cory Booker, okay? This is not going to be us sitting on the Capitol steps singing "We Shall Overcome." That's not it. It's not going to be us on the floor of Congress singing "We Shall Overcome." That time has passed. Can we pay homage to the people who did that, to the risk, to them bringing that technology into their particular moment when it was current? Absolutely. But this current moment calls for something different. It calls for us to be innovative. It calls for us to think about what are the things as humans we share, and how can we now thread that consciousness and that conscientiousness from one person to the other while we are identifying our adversaries and our allies. Come on, baby, that's good to me. Come on now, huh? Do you hear what I'm saying? That's where we are in this particular situation. My grandma called every week, child, while I'm on this thing. I don't know that lady. I love my grandma. That she must have felt my spirit, huh? That's where we are in this context. That's where we are in history. That's why I'm saying joy is a strategy. Do y'all remember? Okay, I'm getting excited because I got some books here I want to share. I'm getting excited. Okay, listen. Have y'all read The Color Purple? Huh? That's one of my favorite books. I was actually trying to find my copy. It's somewhere. It's anyway. I, the Color Purple is one of my favorite books. I read The Color Purple, Soap the Fabric. Yes, I remember that. Yes, ma'am. The revolution will be revitalized. Oh, that's a word. That's a word in and of itself. Mm. So The Color Purple, the word. Stay focused, Johnson. You get too excited. I told you I was waiting on y'all all week. The Color Purple. It is a book that I have read. I read so much in my life, I had memorized the text. Not only did I memorize the text, I had memorized the movie. So I said all that to say, I love it. There is this scene where Celie and Suge are in a field and they're walking, right? Now, before I even get to that, I want to talk about what Suge, we want to interrogate what Suge meant in the book, who she was symbolically. Now, if you think about Mister's relationship with Celie, Mr. He was what? He was violent. He was abusive. He was authoritarian. He ran his house as if he was a dictator. He was what? A bully, right? But when Suge came on the scene, huh, he became a completely different man because he didn't treat Suge that way. One, because Suge wasn't with that foolishness and she wasn't scared of Mr. Two, she understood his weakness and she knew that he was a bully. And three, she knew that she was the prize. So Shook comes in and Mr. doesn't beat on her. Mr. isn't violent in that way towards her. And he has convinced himself in his mind that he loves her. But he doesn't, right? He wants to control her. He wants to own Suge. So Suge in the Color Purple represents freedom, huh? She represents creativity. She represents joy. She represents pleasure, does she not? And who does she teach those things to? She teaches them to Celie. So when Celie gets into this space of where she understands that joy is her own, that beauty is her own, that her power is her own, she became a totally and completely different person. Huh? Did she not tell Mr. what she was gonna do to him? Did she not start bullying did she not stand up to the bully? That's what joy does. Oh, it sounds, listen, there's going to be some people that argue against this and like, oh, you're talking about frivolity. I'm not talking about frivolousness. I'm talking about innovation and technology. What my sister say? She said the revolution will what? Be revitalized. I'm talking about the revitalization of the human spirit. And if we do not stop and catch our breaths while we are in this space, ducking and dodging and trying to what Michael Jackson say? Too high. What is it? Too high to get over, too low to get under. So we stuck in the middle. That's what we're going to be if we do not take a moment to intentionally pause, and figure out where we are. That is the beauty of this thing. Okay, so that's joy is a political strategy. If you think about joy stands up to the bully, huh? Joy says, joy gives you time to think. What's our word? Interrogate. Joy provides you with the space and opportunity to interrogate what you are seeing, what you are witnessing, who are you interacting with, and who they really are. Huh? Are they as strong and powerful as they present themselves to be? Or is it a mask? Paul Lawrence Dunbar said that we wear the mask. Said, what? Come on, somebody. Huh? Fanon talks about the mask that we wear. That is where we are. That is the precipice. That is the cliff. Now, either we're going to go over it or it's going to go over us. But as human beings, we need to be thinking about the connectivity. And we get caught up in this AI. We get, I'm on the TikTok. I'm on the YouTube. I'm on the LinkedIn. I'm using the technology. I'm talking to people across the country, and I ain't left my house, right? That is great. But the innovation and the technology that we have to be relying on right now is the human spirit. It is human beings. That is the connectivity, not your Wi-Fi, not your AT&T. I don't think people got dial up anymore. Do people still got dial up? Stay focused, Johnson. It's not your AT&T, huh? It's not your fiber. What is the fiber network? What's the people? Xfinity. It's not that. That is not the connectivity. That is not the technology that we need to be relying on. The technology is in ourselves. Oh, that's good. I hope I help somebody. Because maybe I sure help myself. Maybe I'm gonna start preaching here, huh? Listen, that is the challenge where we are now. How do we use these things that we do as humans that we all share? And let me say this in talking about sharing. When you start trying to control how people innovate and use their technology, joy becomes disrupted. It becomes corrupted, right? Joy and control cannot occupy the same space at the same time. That is no longer joy. That is a performance. Huh? That's no longer joy. That is you. What Audre Lorde say? You're using the master's tools to dismantle the master's house. That's you with the master's tools in your hand, trying to dictate to someone else how they can show up and innovate in a space. That is not what I am talking about. And until we divorce ourselves, and I mean fully and authentically and truthfully divorce ourselves from those tools, that is going to be the perpetual cycle, because we're in that cycle right now. That is going to be the perpetual cycle that we find ourselves in. Huh? That's good, ain't it? Yes, indeed. Okay. All right. I want to be on time tonight. Did I tell you that I'm writing a listen, first of all, good things are happening. I wrote a book called Hijacking Equity. Actually, all of this that I am talking about is in my book. It's called Hijacking Equity and the Fight for Justice, a practical guide. It's a long title. A practical guide on language liberation and leadership. That's really the point. It is to give people tools and strategies and tactics that they can use every day in their lives while simultaneously interrogating systems and situating themselves in structures. That's the point. That's the thing that we are missing, right? We want to fight with ourselves and others on how we are interrogating what is going on around us. That was one of my things. That was one of my biggest challenges in the academy, was when folks were telling me that I had to choose which sociological paradigm I needed to use to interrogate whatever issue problem that I was looking at. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. If this, I don't have to, there are contentions between functionalism, conflict theory, and / historical materialism and symbolic interactionism. There are contentions, right? There are assumptions that come along with all of them. But what I was arguing, right, if you've read Wole Soyinka, what I was arguing is that there is a fourth space. Like, because we grew up in oppositions and binaries and dichotomies does not mean that there are things that are not happening all at the same time. Didn't Kimberly Crenshaw teach us that? Huh? It wasn't that Patio Collins that came up with the Matrix? I don't have to pick and choose how I'm going to interrogate and then navigate this space and then be able to situate a social problem. I don't have to do that because that's how you look at the world. That's your business. Hey, good for you. But what I'm going to do for me, myself, and I, she, me, her, we're going to look at this thing panoramically because it is the binary, it is the opposition, it is the negation that has got us here in the first place. Huh? So yes, so I talk about that in my book. Now, before we leave, I've been talking about, slow down, Johnson. You excited. Sugar, you excited, okay? Too much coffee. So there are some books that I have been talking about over the last, we've been together 6 weeks, y'all, over the last 6 weeks. And I have been looking for this. I have looked high and low for this book in my house. And I just so happened to sit here and found it today. This is one of the books that will help us when we're talking about joy is a political strategy. Pleasure is a resistance and a tactic. When we talk about weeping as a strategy, this is The Body Is Not an Apology: The Power of Radical Self-Love by Sonia Renee Taylor. I know, so I know it, honey. I get excited. This is a must-have. If you have not had the privilege of meeting Sonia Renee, so Sonia is a poet. I'm talking about this lady like I don't know her. Sonia is a poet. I'm not saying poet. Maybe YouTube her tonight and look up her performances. I was a slam poet in Houston 20 years ago. That's crazy. 20 years ago, and that's when I first met her. And she is powerful, but she interrogates joy and she interrogates the body, and she talks about white supremacist delusion and how it has had an impact on how people are able to love themselves, how people are able to see themselves and admonish themselves. Baby, when I tell you this book is it, this is it. Now, these are, I got 3 more books, and then I'm gonna let y'all go. We're gonna have a benediction, okay? This other book is Gloria Alzindua. It's called Borderlands, La Frontera. It is about the new mestiza. And so I was reading this when I was writing my dissertation, and my argument was that we have not fully interrogated. I'm telling you, that's my word for the night. We have not fully interrogated how we push people to the edges of society, and then what is the space in between those borders, right? Borders are like made up lines of demarcation, right? Delineations of this space versus that space, right? Show it again. It's called The Body Is Not the Apology by Sonia Renee Taylor. And so she then it looks at borderlands and like this space. Oh, this is it. She looks at how people occupy these spaces between these borders and how these false lines, right, of demarcations of spaces have been a product of colonialism, and then how we then reenact those things in society. One of my favorite passages in here, and that was a really rudimentary explanation of this book, but I got 2 minutes, right? One of my favorite passages in here is How to Tame a Wild Tongue. So if you have not read this book, read the book. And Pleasure Activism. So I don't know if y'all know, but I did a lot of work before these people, you know what I'm saying? When I came, child, people have researched me, and it's just par for the course. I really leave it alone. No weapon. No weapon. Anyway, this is The Politics of Feeling Good. And this is Adrienne Marie Brown. I was just quoting her earlier today. If you do not have this book, Pleasure Activism, The Politics of Feeling Good, I need you to get this book. Good book. And last book in the minute and 40 seconds we have left, this is All the Women Are White, All the Blacks Are Men, but Some of Us Are Brave. This is a book that I got, I think I was at Howard when I got this book. This is a Black women study book. It was edited by Patricia Bell Scott and who is this? Barbara Smith. If you have not gotten this book, get this book. There's something in here in particular that I wanted to tell you about, and I should have been prepared. No. Dispelling Myths. That's it. The whole section 3, Dispelling the Myths, Black Women and the Social Sciences, and then you have to do that to go into section 4, okay, which is Creative Survival, Preserving the Mind, Body, and Spirit. So if you do not have this book, get this book, okay? There was something I couldn't find my copy, but there. Ooh, if no, I'll find it for next week. But there's another book that I really rely on, and it is by, it's by Adrienne Marie Brown. It's a Black book. It looks kind of vintage. I'll find the book, y'all, and I'll give you the book next week. So we did our book talk. All right, we're on time. Okay, listen, I've enjoyed my time with y'all tonight. Thank you for indulging me in all the things that inside of my mind. As y'all can see, there's a lot of inside of my head, and I be trying to get it out and articulate and express my way as the best way as possible. But these conversations that we're having right now are necessary. If you have not, put on your calendars March 29th. We're having the Joy as Strategy online experience, March 29th. 10 a.m. Registration, all of those things will be out very soon. So that is that. I did write a book. The book is coming out very soon. It's called Hijacking Equity and the Fight for Justice, a practical guide for language, liberation, and leadership in a time of fear. And if you don't take anything else from this conversation tonight, I want you to take away that the human spirit is, and human connection, the human spirit and human connection are the innovation and the technology that we need to be relying on now. So thank you so much. Much love to you, sis. Thank you for being here tonight. I'll see y'all next Wednesday, 7 p.m. Good night.